All right, guys, here we go again. We're back at it. Welcome back to our video series. And in this video here, we're going to be talking about the toolbar, which is what I've got right here in the middle. In the last video, you might have seen me grab this thing and drag it out into the middle of the page to tell you that I was going to start talking about it. And here we go. It is an adjustable thing. You can grab it from where it sits over here on the left side, and you can move it around. And the reason you might want to do that is maybe just to bring it closer to your artboard or whatever drawing you have going. Just might feel a little bit better. Who knows what for, but it is a thing to point out that it is an adjustable item. And the same goes for your panels bar over here as well. You can drag out individual sets of tools from your panels bar, and you can place them anywhere you want over here in your interface so that they're maybe closer to whatever it is that you're working on. So trying to minimize the amount of mouse movements that you make, having to go from one side of the screen to the other, actually can help a lot with fatigue and can help you stay motivated throughout the duration of the project that you're working on. The less you have to move the mouse, the better off it'll be. So that's an option for you, but I will like to point out that you can paint yourself into a corner a little bit by moving these things out, and then when you go to put them back, it can be difficult to get them to go into the right spot. What is that one doing? You can maybe forget how they were together and what order they were in. And so if that ever happens to you, I want to just cover this one more time. It's the same tip from the previous video. You go to Window, and there's this option here for Workspace. As you can see, and as we've mentioned, we're using the Essentials workspace, which is the most common workspace to be used. And you can just go here to Reset Essentials. Essentials is the workspace, and to reset the Essentials, we'll put everything back to where it belongs, and that will be the most familiar for you. So try to stay in that zone, but also experiment moving things around, because you do have that backup plan in case things do get haywire. You can always get back to where you started. Okay? All right. So I told you I was going to start talking about the toolbar, and I am going to do that. And I think that we'll just get started with that right away. I'm just going to give you a quick rundown. As you can see here on my screen, if I double click anywhere in the black area of the screen, it will go to open. We all remember that from the first video. But the very first tool in the toolbar is called the selection tool. If I hover over it, I get a little drop down that tells me the name of it. Also, in parentheses, there's a capital V, and that tells me that if I press capital V, it will automatically activate that tool. It's a hotkey. You don't have to mess around with hotkeys. It's a lot easier to just go over here and grab this selection tool. So when I grab that, it's a very helpful tool. The selection tool can be used to select items that you've drawn. It can also be used to click on any area that you don't have any drawing on to deselect something. So as we get into drawing, we're going to see a little bit more how this is used, but the selection tool is used very often. So now the one below that is called the direct selection tool, and the hotkey for that is A. Also, when we look at this one, we see that there's a little white arrow in the corner of the tool, which means if we click and hold down on it, there's a few other tools nested within it. The tool that's nested in this one is called the group selection tool, and that's not something we're going to really cover, but it's just something to point out that anywhere where you see one of those little white corners, there should be more than meets the eye. And then over here you've got your magic wand tool, which you can use to just randomly magic wand around a portion of your drawing to select that section of line work. You've also got a lasso tool, which is used a lot in the same way. Then you've got another set of tools down here below that. Now, one thing to point out about this toolbar is that there's this little, it's hard to show it to you, but there's this little dark segment line that separates these first four tools from the next 6 tools. Right, 7 tools. And that segment line is used to designate the difference between the first set of tools and the next. The first set of tools is for selecting drawings, or selecting portions of your drawing, or selecting, I don't know what, images on the screen. Selecting anything, okay? These are all different tools for doing that. So it's selection. The next up is, these are all drawing tools. So we've got the pen tool. Now this pen tool is going to be the most valuable tool that we learn in the class. This is going to be the thing that draws the line work, and then that line work is going to be the thing that drives the laser cutters in the prototyping lab. You've also got a type tool, and that's for just creating different sets of type, whatever you like. And this is a good example. If we click and hold down on that, there's a number of different type tools inside of Illustrator. There's the standard one, but then there's also type on a path, vertical type tool if you want to type from top to bottom. Also, if you want to designate a path, or when they say path, what they really mean is line. So if you want to draw a squiggly line and then type along that squiggly line, you could use any one of these, vertical type on a path tool or type on a path tool, to get that done. Okay, we're just going to leave it on regular type tool for now. Next up, we've got the line segment tool. Also underneath here is the arc tool, spiral tool. You've got a grid tool and a polar grid tool. We're not going to mess around with that one too much, but it is there and it will be helpful for advanced users. Below that is our rectangle tool, and as I showed you in the first video, when we click and hold down on this one, we gain access to a plethora of shape tools. So I like to call this the shape tool. I know it's called the rectangle tool, but anytime I want to draw a shape, like if I want to draw a circle, I would go to the ellipse tool. Ellipses and circles are the same thing, just in perspective. So there's also the polygon tool, and there's a star tool as well, which is a fun tool for creating all sorts of stars and starbursts and stuff like that. We'll play around with that maybe. You've got a paintbrush tool, and you've also got the pencil tool here. There's also a smooth tool and an eraser there. Pencil tool is not really something we do too much of in Illustrator, but it's there. You've also got this thing here, which is your, let's see if we click and hold down on it, the blob brush tool. So if you draw a general shape and then you want to kind of blob it out, this is the tool to use for that. And then you've got an eraser tool, which has a hotkey of Shift-E. The eraser tool we don't use very often because we just rather use the direct selection tool to precisely select and delete sections of a line, as opposed to using this tool, which can be a little bit low-tech, we'll call it. So then we see another little segment line indicating that we are now leaving the section of tools which are used for drawing and moving on to another section of tools. So in this one, we have the rotate tool, the scale tool, width tool, free transform tool. Are you starting to get it? These tools are used for transforming objects, rotating objects, scaling objects, moving objects around. That's what all these things do. Okay, there's even a perspective grid tool for drawing things in perspective. Shape builder tool, where if you want to combine two shapes, two general shapes that you've created into a larger, more complex tool, you can do that. So these are transform tools here. Another little segment line indicates that we're switching over now to another portion of tools which have a different function. This one is the mesh tool. There's a gradient tool, an eyedropper tool, and a blend tool. Now these are really for color illustrating in Illustrator. So the mesh tool is used to draw a mesh over a color gradient and allow changes in value to that color and gradient to imply shapes. Below that, we've got the gradient tool itself. Then we've got the eyedropper tool, which is used to grab colors from an illustration that you've received or from a photo that you've imported into Illustrator. And then down here we've got our blend tool, which blends several shapes into one. Unfortunately, for the purposes of our class, we really just want to drive the laser cutter with Illustrator, so we're not going to spend too much time covering these things because these are really about illustrating, and we're going to be more into line work using the pen tool up here. So, but it's good to point them out just so you don't feel intimidated like you're not allowed to use them or something like that. You just have to do it on your own time. Another little line indicates another switch in function. The next up is called the symbol sprayer tool. We might make some symbols in the class, things like arrows or dashes or dots or something like that, and this is the tool used to distribute those across a drawing. You've also got a graph tool, which if you felt like it, you could use Illustrator to create a graph. There's also an artboard tool. Now, we haven't talked about artboards yet because we haven't made a new file yet, but in our next video we will, and the artboard tool will be used to adjust the size of the page we're drawing on. There's a slice tool, and there's a hand tool to move around. There's also a zoom tool if you don't feel like zooming in manually, so that's also there. Down here, the thing that's grayed out, this is your color picker right here. It's going to give you a color for the fill of an item and then a color for the stroke. And you can switch the fill and color, you can switch the fill and the stroke using this little arrow right here. But none of that makes sense until we actually start to draw something, okay? And that's what we're going to do in our very next video, okay? So, I want you to keep tuning in, and in our next video we're going to do the funnest thing, which is make a document and start drawing, okay? So anyway, this has been your video on the toolbar. Thank you for watching, and I will talk to you later. Thanks.